Hey everyone, I'm back. Once again, I'm Jesse with the Humble Fungus, and I'm walking you through Hoodie Tek, or as I like to call it, a simple, scalable, and reproducible way of fruiting mushrooms. Any kind of mushroom. Oh yeah. So, in the past two videos, I've explained the basics. What are these things? Why are we doing this? Some of the background information. In the video before this, I actually walked you through making your own little fruiting bag or fruiting block. Now, let's assume that we have fast forwarded 2 weeks and this bag is fully colonized, much like this bag, right? If this bag was fully colonized, what I would do is exactly like I did with this oyster block. Now, as I explained in the other videos, well, I'll re-explain the rubber band, but let's assume both these blocks look the same. They're both shock white and fully colonized. So they're both ready to fruit. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out a trusty heavy-duty rubber band. Your size doesn't matter. What matters is that you can do this. You can put it around the block, and then you can get it, and it's nice, it's tight, and it's snug. Now, the tighter and snugger you can get, the better. So sometimes I'll double it up. I really like to use large, heavy-duty, like file folder rubber bands, because you can actually double them up. The point is to cut deep enough into the substrate that you cut off all of the oxygen here at the bottom layers. Why? Well, as I explained in the previous videos, side pins and other issues and moisture loss, etc., are frequently caused by the reduction of the substrate over time, right? So as the fungus grows and as it fruits, this block shrinks because the moisture is being pulled out of it by the fungus. You'll get side pins if you've got air gaps here where the plastic is against the substrate, right? So there's this like little loose spot here, so I'm just gonna tug that up, squeeze that air out. Why? Side pins, contamination issues, etc., love high CO2, high moisture environments. And in this type of ecosystem, that place happens to be this spot right here along the side of the bag, right against the block, right? So as the block shrinks, more air bubbles will form. So this rubber band, you can keep tightening it up and it cuts into the block. And so you cut all that oxygen off, right? That will help prevent side pins. It'll help retain more moisture. It also signals the fungus due to the surface pressure dynamics, right? See here, what we're doing is we're telling the fungus that this is up, right? Kind of like if you put your light up there, the fungus will fruit up because it knows that that's the sun, I've got to go up. This also helps by signaling the fungus that says, hey, this is the surface. Like there's a pressure differential here. This is where you need to go. Cool. So, now that I put the rubber band around it, as I said in the other video, I'd cut a hole either here or here. Let me demonstrate and show you why. So, Hoodie Tek. Where do you get the hood from? Well, it's a bag. So, here we go. This is a fully colonized mushroom fruiting block. Pick your species. Therapeutic, culinary, medicinal, doesn't matter, right? Now, just like with the king oyster block, I'm gonna put that rubber band right there. About an inch and a half to an inch and a half from the surface of the block, right? Again, blocks that microclimate, less side pins, less contamination issues, more moisture retention. Now, at this point, it's ready to fruit, right? It's fully colonized, it's all white, we're ready to go. Okay, so, if I don't see any pins, or there's no like real big fruits coming out, it doesn't need that much oxygen. I'm going to cut a 2-inch hole right here below the filter patch. Now, you've got a couple of options. You could put it here, or you can put it right above the filter patch. Really, it's your call. It depends on how long you want the stems to be. That's right. Cutting it here, right, versus cutting it here means that there's a different mixture, a different ratio of CO2 to O2, because CO2 is heavier than air. So I usually cut my bags right here, and I'll show you why. Probably should have brought scissors, but I've got a knife, should work just as well, right? Now I'm going to take and I'm going to cut that hole. You can see it. Little hole, done. I would take this colonized block, I would then put it into my fruiting chamber, so a place with a humidifier, some light, let it do its thing. Or I put it on a bookshelf, or in my kitchen, right? I just let it kind of do its thing and wait, and mushrooms would start to pen and fruit and things like that. But let's talk about that. When you probably can see that there's not a lot of room in this bag, which means that depending on what you're growing, it could get kind of cramped in here, etc. What I like to do is when I see the mushrooms get nice and big and I see their stems develop and I see their caps developing, what I do is I cut the bag back gradually, right? Over time, I give them more oxygen, right? Because as they mature, that's what they're looking for, right? So I cut the bag back a little bit more, right? And that could give them more room, right? So just kind of leave it like that, more oxygen. But if you've got really chunky boys like these king oysters, that's not gonna help you entirely. That's where you get the hood. Let's assume that I'm harvesting this. Let me show you that first, because that will actually explain some things. So, I've cut this 2-inch hole. It's ready to harvest. What I'm gonna do is, like I said, cut back this bag, and then I'm actually gonna cut back some of these folds back here, right? Because it's kind of folded like an accordion. Okay, so what did I do? I cut the front and the sides. What does that do? Bloop. Voila. Now, if this was colonized and fruiting, right, either A, I could fold this back right now and the canopy would brawl like that in my fruiting chamber, or I can just lean in here and harvest. What's nice, if I do this and I harvest, then all I do for the next flush is I take this and I fold it back over. You can see I tuck the bottom in under the top. This restores that high CO2, high humidity environment. Here comes the second flush. So, when I was saying before, these king oysters, man, they're gonna grow so fast that, you know, having a little tiny hole right here could be great, but I mean, they grow so fast that maybe I wanna cut it back. When I put this into fruiting conditions, instead of making a little hole, maybe I'll cut it back like this. Maybe I'll fold this back and pour in a little bit of a casing layer, right? The point is that every flush, every harvest, etc., you're trying to restore this environment, this dome, right? What's nice about this is you can actually mist the inside to control your humidity. For example, this is ISO, so don't shoot me. For example, let's say you harvest it. You can come in here, spray up in the top, never the substrate, let it roll down, boom, you've just hydrated it. What I like to do though, is I don't like misting and I don't like dunking. Why? Contamination. What I do is I go, and you can get these 60 milliliter syringes off of Amazon, or bigger, or an IV bag. And what I'll do is after I do that harvest and I fold this back, what I'll do is I'll fill this syringe full of distilled water or freshly boiled water, either one as long as it's sterile. I fill the syringe with it. Take this off and I'll just show you. It's full of water. And then after I harvest, right, I inject 60 ml water back into that substrate, and I do a direct injection, right? That does two things. Number one, it's going to go directly into that substrate, directly into the fungus a lot faster than having it sit and absorb it through the cake and everything else like that. Number two, I have a lot less likelihood of having pooled water sitting anywhere. Pooled water, contamination, good times. So you can obviously inject more if the block is greatly reduced, but basically what's nice with this is that you can watch that reduce over time, right? The fungus is going to grow, it's going to shrink the block, it's going to absorb that moisture, and then you can just re-inject that moisture. Like injecting flavor into a turkey on Thanksgiving. So, any questions? Feel free to drop me a comment, shoot us an email. But that's really start to finish Hoodie Tek at its very basic core. You get a lot of benefits with this, right? In a 4x8 tent, you can fit 90 to 100 of these blocks, right? You can, like, each one of these is the equivalent of a single mono tub, right? So think about that. If you've ever grown anything in tubs or larger logs and things like that, in a 4 foot by 8 foot growing tent, I can fit 100 of these, right? And your yields don't change, right? Because your yields are really determined you can really expect the same yields that you'd get from any other growth form factor, so tubs, etc., because that growth rate, that yield, etc., is determined by the genetics and the substrate, right? The tertiary thing is this environment, and what we've done is we've given it that chemically composition substrate, beautiful, they love it, it's sterilized. We've given it great nutrition starters, we've hydrated it well, everything's going off to the races, so now all we have to do is give it this nice little enclosed environment, and voila, right? I can run 100 of these in a tent. And each one is self-contained. There's a lot less risk of cross-contamination because, as you can see, it spends all of its time like this unless the mushrooms get really big and they push back the canopy like that, which happens all the time, which is really great. But then you just roll it back over, right? You can add casing in between flushes. You can add casing now. You can, the sky's really the limit with this. Heck, you can even use this, and then if you really wanted, you can actually just cut the top off the bag and put it inside of your fruiting chamber again. Really, the sky's the limit. So I hope you enjoyed these videos. I hope you try out Hoodie Tek. Hope you check out our store, see all the great things that we sell that'll help you grow. And if you liked all this, click like, click subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, and keep on mushing.